Steve, you've just finished a piece for Dolce Suono Ensemble's Mahler 100 Schoenberg 60 project. So what text did you choose to base this piece on for Dolce Suono Ensemble and Eric Owens?
I went to one of Mahler's favorite poets, Rickert, from 18th century. Very prolific poet. Mahler used those poems in Rückert-Lieder and in Kindertotenlieder and some other places. Sure. But I found a poem which Mahler never said, called Aus der Jugendzeit, from childhood, from youth, something like that.
Right.
And it's a poem which has been said by many obscure composers, now including me, but not by Mahler.
Be obscure, but fair.
The most famous composer who ever used this text was Friedrich Nietzsche, who's not famous as a composer.
Which is really, have you heard the piece?
I saw it. It's pretty good. It's a little bland, but it's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's in E major, very very conventional.
Yeah. Not what you'd expect from him necessarily. But.
It's a nostalgic poem about how things were when one was a child and how things are so different when one tries to go back to childhood. It's a poem about loss, really, and about nostalgia. And it seemed to me to fit this project well because, of course, thinking back to Mahler and Schoenberg, those are composers who were concerned about loss and nostalgia also. And for us, they're objects of nostalgia. You know? So it's a kind of triple looking back to Schoenberg and Mahler looking back to Rickert, and everybody kind of feeling nostalgic.
So, structurally, what would a listener hear from Schoenberg or from Mahler in the piece?
The most obvious thing, I think, will be that when Rickert begins to talk about farewell, in German, Abschied, we begin to hear a kind of filtered version of the Abschied movement of Das Lied von der Erde, some of the last music Mahler ever wrote, actually, and some of the most famous and most beautiful. But what you might not notice, but I'll tell you, is that the piece also begins with an outright quotation from Schoenberg.
Interesting.
It's the beginning of the last song of Pierrot Lunaire, and that's a piece called O alter Duft, O old perfume, from fairy tale times. That's a piece about looking back to a lost past.
Interesting.
And so we open with Schoenberg, we close with Mahler. And of course, that Schoenberg-Mahler circle was very important to me, to all the composers of my generation, I think, growing up. So it's a kind of homecoming or homesick journey for me also to re-involve myself with this music.
Interesting. It's a nice connection, actually, that you've quoted something from Pierrot, because that's the configuration of the ensemble, plus voice and percussion for this particular piece. And so when you say reflecting back, I mean, you have self-identified with the Franco-Russian schools, more so than German. So, what is it for you now making this connection?
Well, it's true that the last 30 or 40 years I've been thinking more about French and Russian music, and that's why it was so nice to go back to my own sort of student mentality when Schoenberg was very important to me. And Pierrot is one of my touchstone pieces, for my life. So that was a kind of nice homecoming. And, the distance between these pieces, the distance between a movement in Pierrot and, let's say, Debussy is not as far as we used to think.
Right.
Debussy had Pierrot on his piano when he died. It was one of the last scores he was studying.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And so it is kind of a closing of a circle for me. I would not probably have thought to do this had not Dolce Suono and Mimi Stillman come up with this really nice idea.
Yeah. It's
so
a great idea.
I'm glad they did.
Yeah, and with Mimi's historical background, it's actually really great. And so you will be there for at least one of the performances, the May 11th and 15th premiere performances in Philadelphia.
I'll be at the May 15th performance. On May 11th, I have a concert in New York, and pretending to be all places at all times.
Good reason. Well, I hope to see you there.
Thank you.